So welcome back from your spring break. I hope you guys had enough time to enjoy yourselves over the spring break. I know that, because of quarantine, we could really go outside. But I still hope that you had some fun and got, enough time to kind of like relax. Um, so we are gonna start a new unit, and it has to do with measurements, okay? So for my French immersion students, I'm going to be posting your notes separately because I need you to know, um, you know, um, like the words in French. So like, what does meters, stand for in French, which isn't too difficult, but there are other words that might throw you off, right? Like inches, feet, and stuff like that. So please, even though you're following this video, I want you to look at those notes separately. So in this unit, I mean, it's not a very challenging one in my opinion, so it will be um, more of a review from grade 9 than anything. So we will start with unit conversion and then dive into calculating surface area and then volume. So how um, do you approach a question like this? So, for example, these are starter questions, right? So they're not too difficult. I know some of you can actually do these questions in your head, but you know, it starts off easy, but then it becomes more and more challenging, right? So, I'm gonna ask you to actually follow a structure as opposed to just doing it in your head. So, again, there's many ways of doing the first question. If I'm not mistaken, maybe in grade 9, the method that they showed you was cross multiplication, right? So I want to know what 10 centimeters is equals to in meters, right? So I want to know how much is it in meters, but then you have to find the ratio, right? You know that 100 centimeters, right? I want my units to match, right? So because I have centimeters on top, I'm going to have centimeters at the bottom, right? I know that 100 centimeter is actually 1 meter, right? And now you can cross multiply, right? So you cross multiply, so you multiply 10 by 1. So 10 times 1 is 10, and then you multiply 100 by x. So 100 times x is 100x, and then you can divide by 100, divide by 100 to solve for x, right? So x will just equals to 0.1 meters. That's one way of doing it, but that's not the best way of doing it, okay? So that's why I went over this very quickly. So if you know how to do it this way, that's great. You can still use this technique, but what I'm going to show you will be much faster, and hopefully you will like this method, okay? So this method is known as unit analysis. Sometimes they also call this dimensional analysis. Um, so doesn't matter what you call it, but it's a very fast way of doing a question like this, right? So you have 10 centimeters, okay? And you want to change this into meters, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have to multiply this by a ratio that you are already familiar with, right? So because my goal is to cancel my units, so because I have centimeters on top, I want to get rid of centimeter and get meters at the end, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have to put the centimeter unit at the bottom over here, right? Because the centimeter and the centimeter will cancel out. Okay, so that's how you do it. So whatever you have on top that you want to get rid of, you have to put the same thing at the bottom so that they cancel out. Okay, so I need to have centimeters at the bottom over here. And now I'm going to use a ratio that I am already familiar with. Okay, so I know that 100 centimeters is equals to 1 meter. Okay. Now the centimeters and the centimeters will cancel out. And on top you have 10 times 1, which is 10, right? And at the bottom, you have 100. So remember, if you don't see a denominator, it's always 1. So if you want, it's 1 times 100, which is 100, right? And don't forget about the meters, right? So this is the unit that hasn't been canceled out, right? So you have to put that, just gonna put that back here. And when you divide 10 by 100, you get 0.1 meters. Okay, so that's one way of doing a question like this. Now, for question 2, same thing. You have 5 kilometers. You want to change this into meters, right? So you're going to have to multiply this by a ratio that you're familiar with. Now, because the kilometers is on top, you need this to cancel out. Okay, so you're going to have to multiply this by a fraction, and you have to put kilometers in your numerator, okay? Because the kilometer and the kilometer will cancel. Okay, that's the goal, right? So now you have to rely on a ratio that you're familiar with, right? So we know that 1 kilometer is actually 1,000 meters, right? So when you multiply this, the kilometers and the kilometers will cancel. So 5 times 1,000 is 5,000. Okay, and then the units that remain, right, the unit that remains is the meters. So your answer is 5,000 meters. Okay, um, I'm just gonna put the meters over here because I'm running out of space. Okay, now hopefully I have some space left here. Okay, so question 3. Again, you start with what you're given. You're given 0.75 kilometers. Okay, so 0.75 kilometers, okay, times. Now I'm going to have to put the kilometer at the bottom, right, because the kilometer and the kilometer will have to cancel. But the problem is, I want my answer to be in centimeters, but I don't know how many centimeters there are in a kilometer. It's kind of difficult, right? So you're gonna have to do 2 steps over here. So forget about centimeters. Let's just focus on what we already know. I know that 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, right? So by doing this, the kilometers and the kilometers will cancel, and now the unit that I'm left with is actually meters, okay? But that's not what I want because I want my answer to be in centimeters. So I'm going to have to multiply this again. Okay. Now, because I need to get rid of this meter, that means my meter unit in this fraction has to be at the bottom, right? So meter has to be at the bottom. Now, let's find a familiar ratio of meters and centimeters. I know that 1 meter is actually 100 centimeters, right? So now the meter and the meter will cancel, and on top you have 0.75 times 1,000 times 100, and at the bottom you only have 1 times 1, which is just 1, okay? So let's multiply this. I'm gonna actually have to use a calculator for this. So 0.75 times 1,000 is 750, and then times 100, right? Because you have to multiply by 1,000, then you have to multiply by 100. So times 100 gives me 75,000. 75,000 on top, and then 1 times 1 at the bottom is just 1. I don't have to write the 1, right? So it's just 75,000 centimeters, okay? So this is a faster way of doing the same question. I hope this kind of makes sense, but we're going to do a little bit more practicing in the next few questions, okay? So this was a starter question, right? As long as you got these answers for question 1, 2, and 3. So for question 3, this is the final answer. Question 1, this is the final answer. And question 2, this is my final answer. If you got these answers, then you're good, okay? So now let's move on, okay? So the focus of today's class is we're going to talk about something known as imperial units, okay? These units are more commonly used in the States. In Canada, we use SI units, so also known as Système International. So that's like the most commonly used units. But in the States, they rely on inches, foot, yard, and miles. And we're gonna kind of like, I'm gonna show you how to go back and forth between imperial and SI units. Okay, so just to relate imperial units, I'm going to ask you to think about your ruler that you probably used a lot in elementary school, right? Remember, in your ruler, like you had 30 centimeters, right? It was 30 centimeters long or 1 foot long. And on the other side, you had this 1, 2, and 3, 4, and all that stuff, right? So what you have down here from 1 to 12 is what is known as inches, okay? So if you kind of like paid attention, if you have a rule, you can check this. The 1 actually aligns perfectly with 2.5, okay? So what this tells you is that 1 inch is actually 2.5 centimeters, okay? And we're gonna talk more about that in the next page. But here, I want you to kind of relate, I want you to kind of understand how imperial units work, okay? So we have inches, 1 feet. So this ruler over here is actually 1 feet, okay? 1 feet, this is the common ratio that you need to know, but this will be given to you on the test, so you don't have to memorize any of this, is also 12 inches. Why 12 inches? Because look, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 12 inches in this feet, okay? So 1 feet, you can think about that as your Subway sandwich, right? So remember in Subway you can get a 12-inch sandwich, which is a foot long, right? Or a 6-inch sandwich, which is kind of like half a foot, right? Um, so this one, I'm not too sure if you know about this ratio, but this is kind of famous ratio. Now there's also yard, okay? A yard is 3 feet. So if you put three rulers side by side, you're gonna get a yard, okay, which is close to a meter, right? Because three rulers is like 90 centimeters, right? So a yard is very close to a meter. And then finally, you also have a mile, which is 1,760 yards. Okay, so these are your common ratios that you'll have to use. They will be given to you. You don't need to memorize. You just need to know how to use unit analysis, which is what I showed you in the starter question. So we're going to do that one more time. Okay, so let's answer these questions. So we have to change 3 feet into inches. Okay, so um, let's start off with what we're given. We are given 3 feet. Now I have to change this into inches. So I have to multiply this with the ratio that I know. But remember, because I have feet on top, I need this to cancel out. So I'm going to have to put feet at the bottom, right? Is there a ratio up here that gives me um, a relationship between feet and inches? Okay, it's so if you look closely, it's this one. Okay, I know that 1 foot actually equals to 12 inches, right? So by writing it this way, the magic will happen, right? So the feet and the feet will cancel, and then the only unit that remains is inches, which is what I want. So all you have to do is multiply 3 by 12 to get 36. So the answer is 36 inches, okay? Now you're going to do the second question in a similar fashion. So you have 18 inches, right? Because that's what you're given over here. And you need to change this into feet. So now you're going to have to multiply this by a ratio, by a common ratio that is already known to you, okay? And this table over here will give you that ratio. Now, here you have to be careful because I have inches on top. I'm going to have to put inches in my denominator over here so that they can cancel out, right? So that's how you know what goes underneath and what goes on top, because your units have to cancel out. So what do I know? I know that, right, using the table over here. Let me just erase this. I know that, oh, there's this ratio again that I'm going to use. I know that 12 inches is actually equals to 1 foot, all right? So now you multiply, okay? So remember, if your denominator is not given, then it's just 1, okay? Because 18 divided by 1 is still 18. So this is 18 times, so the inches and the inches will obviously cancel, right? So 18 times 1 is 18, and the unit that remains is feet, right? So feet, but 1 times 12 is 12, right? And then you just have to use your calculator and divide, okay? And if you divide 18 by 12, if I'm not mistaken, it's just 1.5, okay? Oops. So 18 times 12 is actually 1.5 feet, okay? Now for the last question, you have to change yards into inches. So let's do this. So again, you start with 3, right? The short form of yards, it's YD. Okay, now go with a ratio that is given to you that relates yards and inches. Is there a ratio that relates yard and inches? Well, there's this one over here. Okay, I'm going to use a different color. You could use this one over here. That will directly give you the answer. So let's do that, okay? So instead of making it too difficult, let's do that. So 3. Now, I need to multiply this, but I have to make sure that my yards, the unit yards, is in my denominator because the yards and the yards have to cancel, right? So yards has to go in the denominator. Now, what does the ratio tell me? It tells me, right, if you look over here, 1 yard is actually 36 inches, okay? So this is number 3. And then that's it, right? Now you have to multiply. So 3, so yards and yards will cancel. 3 times 36 is it 108? 36 times 3, yes. So 108 inches, right? Again, your denominator, if you don't see it, it's just 1, but 1 times 1 is 1. So you don't have to put the 1 over here, right? Because 108 divided by 1 is still 108. So you don't have to do any of that. And this is your final answer. Okay, so I'm going to maybe highlight my answers. So for question 3, it's 108. For question 2, it's 1.5. And then for question 1, it's 36. Okay. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is, okay, we're not going to, I thought I had some practice questions for you, but there will be some down here. Okay. So let's just wait for that. Okay. Now here in this table, we are relating SI units to imperial units again. And again, if you look very closely at the ruler that you have, you'll see that if you align it, it aligns with 2.5. So this tells you that 1 inch is actually 2.5 centimeters. Now, this is not um, exactly, it's not exactly 2.5. In the English textbook, this table, I took a snapshot of this from the English textbook, gives you 2.5 because, that's how the rulers are made, right? So in your ruler, it's 2.5, but that's not exactly 2.5. It's very close to 2.5. It's 2.54, but even 2.54 is an approximation. Okay, it's kind of like an ugly number, I think. But you could use 2.5, you could use 2.54. Friend students, I think, will have to use 2.54. On the test, I will give you these ratios. Okay, so this table will be given to you, and then you will have to use the ratio that I'm giving you, and then you will get the right answers, right? So we just have to be consistent, okay? So yeah, I don't know why the textbook is not consistent because it's exactly the same one. But 2.54 is actually it's more accurate than 2.5, okay? But for the purposes of this video, I guess we'll just use 2.5. Right, so these are the famous ratios. Also 1 foot, right? Is equals to 30 centimeters, as you can see over here, okay? And that's what your ruler kind of shows you, okay? And 1 yard is 3 foot, right? So when you put 3 rulers together, but if you put 3 rulers together, then it's 30 times 3, which is where the 90 comes from, okay? Again, you don't really need to memorize any of this. You just need to know these famous ratios, okay? But I think they kind of make sense if you think about this ruler, okay? So if you were curious when you were young and you were kind of like, you wanted to make sense of what these numbers at the bottom kind of represented, this is what it means, okay? This table kind of like summarizes all that, okay? So let's just clean this up a little bit, okay? Now, let's do these questions. So I have to change 59 meters into feet, okay? 59 meters into feet. So again, there's many ways of doing this. I don't really like to memorize a lot of stuff. I know this will be given to you, but I kind of know these ratios, the famous ones over here that I've um, kind of like highlighted for you. So there's actually two ways of doing this question, okay? One way would be to use this ratio that relates meters and feet together, right? So you could use this ratio, and then it will give you the answer directly, okay? But because that's, not one of the ones that I've highlighted, I'm actually gonna, if you do that, it will give you the right answer, but I'm gonna do this a slightly longer way. But the reason why I'm doing this is because then you don't have to memorize anything, okay? So I know that 59 meters, I'm gonna have to start with 59 meters, right? But changing meters into feet is kind of difficult for me, okay? But I know how to change centimeters into feet. So what I am gonna do is, this 9 doesn't look good, so I'm actually gonna redraw the 9. I'm gonna change 59 meters into centimeters first. So times, right? Because I have meters on top, I'm going to put meters at the bottom so that the units cancel. So first change this into centimeters. So I know that 1 meter is actually equals to 100 centimeters, right? So this is one of the famous ratios that you should all know. So now the meters and the meters, they cancel. You know what? Let me use a different color to cancel my units. Okay, so just so that it's slightly easier to follow. But you see, if I leave it like this, then my final answer will have centimeters, but I don't want centimeters, right? So I'm gonna have to multiply this again. So I will have to multiply this by, now something that relates centimeters to feet, okay? Um, Centimeters to feet, do I have that? Yes, I know that 30 centimeters, right, is actually equals to um, 1 feet, okay? And the reason why I put the centimeters at the bottom is because I want that centimeter to cancel with this one, okay? So that's why I put that at the bottom. So now let's multiply this out. So the centimeter and the centimeter will cancel, right? And then this gives you, on top you have 59 times 100 times 1. So that's just 5,900, right? Because when you multiply 100, you just have to add 2 zeros, but you can totally use your calculator. Um, Now I am I'm gonna fix this because it's 30 centimeters, so it's the centimeters that cancel, right? So at the bottom I have, right, if you don't see the number, right, it's 1, so I have 1 times 1 times 30, so I have 30 at the bottom, right? And if you divide this out, you should get 590 divided by 3, 590 divided by 3, and that's approximately, again, it's an ugly number, so you can just round your answers to 2 decimal places, okay? So it's actually 196.67, oops, 196.67. And so the meters and the meters canceled out, and then I had the centimeter, right, and the centimeter canceling out, which left feet, so that my final answer should have feet, okay? as my units, because that's the only thing that did not get canceled out, which is what I want, right? Now, so this is kind of long, right? A faster way, I guess, would be to just use this ratio over here. So I'm going to do this question again using this ratio, okay? And it will give you the same thing. So we have 50. Let me erase all this, make some space. So we have 59 meters. And I have to change this into feet. So I'm looking for a ratio between meters and feet, and this blue one over here gives me that, right? So again, my meters has to be at the bottom, right? Because I want my units to cancel. So I know that 0.3 meters is actually 1 feet, right? And this is how you can do this question in one step, right? So the meters and the meters will cancel, and then you will have 59 times 1 is 59. And again, if you don't see your denominator, it's 1, and then 1 times 0.3 is 0.3. So 59 divided by 0.3. 59 divided by 0.3 is also 196.67 feet. Okay, so remember, feet is the only unit that kind of survives. So this is how you use unit analysis, okay? So I think what I'm going to do is, just to make a little bit more space, I'm going to erase all this, okay? Because this was just to show you that it doesn't matter what approach you take, the long one or the short one, you will always get the same answer, okay? And because this table will be given to you, maybe it's just wiser to use this ratio, okay? Now, second question, I have 90 feet. I have to change that into centimeters. Is there a ratio over here that relates feet to centimeters? And it's this one over here, right? This one relates feet to centimeters. So let me just clean that up. So again, feet is on top, but I want that to cancel out. So I'm going to have to put feet in my denominator. Now, what does that ratio tell me? It tells me that 1 feet is actually 30 centimeters, okay? And when I do that, the feet, so again, let me use a different color, right? So the feet and the feet will cancel. And my final answer will just be 90 times 30. So 90 times 30 on top, it's 2,700. And at the bottom, I have, remember, if you don't see a denominator, it's 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. I don't have to write that down. And it's 2,700 centimeters, okay? Because centimeter is the only unit that survives. And finally, we have to convert miles into meters. So I'm going to start with 3. Again, the abbreviation for miles is MI, right? So miles. Now, see here, you don't really have a ratio between miles and meters, okay? So we're gonna use this ratio because this gives us the ratio between miles and kilometers, okay? So I know that my denominator has to have miles because then the miles and the miles will cancel, right? So I know that 1 mile is actually equals to 1.6 kilometer, right? But I'm not there yet because my final answer has to be in meters. But if I multiply this out, then my final answer will be in kilometers, okay? So that means I have to multiply again. So because I need to get rid of this kilometer, I need to put kilometer in my denominator, okay? And I know that 1 kilometer is actually 1,000 meters, right? The reason why I'm choosing this ratio is because I want my final answers to be in meters, okay? So guys, this is a really good technique. I hope it's kind of making sense to you because it makes your work a lot faster, and this will always obviously help you a lot when you take your science courses, okay, especially the advanced ones. Because look, see the miles and the okay, again, let me use a different color. So the miles and the miles will cancel, the kilometer and the kilometer will cancel, and you will have your final answer in meters, which is what you want. Okay, so again, if the denominator is not visible, it's 1. So when you multiply the top, you have to multiply 3 times 1.6 times 1,000, which gives you 4,800. So 4,800. And your denominator, you multiply your denominators. Okay, so it's 1 times 1 times 1, it's still 1. Okay, and because meters is the only unit that survives, right, your final answer will be meters. Okay, so 4,800 meters is your final answer. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna ask you to pause the video and try these two questions on your own, and then this is your homework. Okay, guys, so pause the video, do these two questions on your own. So try doing this one. Okay, so I don't know, maybe copy down the question and then pause the video and continue. I'm going to continue, and then, well, I want you to do it on your own so that you can kind of like compare your answers with me. Okay, so pause the video, do this question, but I'm going to continue. So after meeting in Emerson, Manitoba, Hannah drove 62 miles south and Farron drove 98 kilometers north. Who drove faster? Okay, so here the problem is you can't really compare. I know that 62 is less than 98, but this is not 62 kilometers. Okay, if it was 62 kilometers, then the answer would have been Hannah, right? Hannah, no, no, not Hannah, I mean Farine, right? Because 98 is bigger than 62. But because your units are different, right? Whenever you get a question like this, you have to make sure that you have the same units, okay? So it's your choice. You could either change this into miles or change this into kilometers, okay? I'm just gonna change the 62 into kilometers because for some reason, I don't know, kilometers, I'm more familiar with kilometers, right? So I like to get rid of miles, inches, and stuff like that because I'm not American, right? So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so I have 62 miles times, I need to put miles in my denominator, right? So that my units can cancel. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back up here and find a ratio that gives me, that tells me what the relationship is between miles and kilometer. So if you look at your table over here, then you will use this ratio, okay? Because this tells you that 1 mile is actually 1.6 kilometers. So 1 mile is 1.6 kilometer. And now the mile and the, you know what, let me use a different color again. Miles and the mile will cancel out, right? If your denominator is not visible, it's always 1. And when you multiply fractions, right, you have to multiply your numerators separately and your denominator separately. So 62 times 1.6 is 62 times 1.6 is 99.2. And 1 times 1, right? Now I have to multiply my denominator. So 1 times 1 is just 1. And the only unit that survives is kilometer. Now I can compare, right? So 99.2, is that bigger than 98? Yes, it is. So Hannah um, drove farther. Okay. Hope that kind of makes sense. And one last question. Sorry, guys. I know it's been a little bit longer than I had anticipated. But this is the last question. So, Alex is 6 feet 2 inches tall. Um, to list his height on his driver's license application, Alex needs to convert this measurement into centimeters. Okay. So, whenever you have a question like this, guys, you always have to focus on what unit is bigger. So is the feet bigger or is the inches bigger? Feet is bigger, right? Remember, 1 feet is your Subway sandwich, right? And inches are, there's actually 12 inches in 1 feet. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to change this 6 feet into inches, okay? Because now, right now, I can't really use my technique because I have feet and inches, so it's kind of confusing, okay? So what I would ask you to do is just change the feet into inches. So 6 feet, right? And then you multiply times, I know that 1 foot, right, is actually 30 inches, right? And then the reason why I put the feet right at the bottom is so that it can cancel out with this. So let's cancel this out. The feet and the feet will cancel. So, right, if your denominator is not visible, it's 1. Now you multiply your numerator first. So 6 times 30 is 180 inches. So 6 feet means 180 inches, okay? Actually, no, I made a mistake. 1 foot is 12 inches, not 30 inches. It's 30 centimeters, right? So that's why I was kind of confused. So this should be, so let me be consistent with my colors. So this should be 1 foot is actually 12 inches, okay? And now this will simplify to 12 times 6 is 72, right? 72 inches. So that means Alex is 72 inches plus 2 inches, right? So the Alex's height is 74 inches, right? So I hope that kind of makes sense, right? Because the extra 2, so let me write this out. Alex's height is equals to 72 plus the 2 that's coming from here, plus 2, which is equal to 74 inches, okay? See, now I only have 1 unit, so it's really easy to change that into centimeters, okay? So I have to change this into centimeters times. Now I'm gonna have to put inches at the bottom, right? Because the inches and the inches will cancel, right? This one and this one, they will cancel. Now, what do I know? I know that 1 inch, right? Because I want my answer to be in centimeters. So if you go back to your table, 1 inch is actually 2.5 centimeters. So I'm gonna have to rely on this ratio over here, okay? So 1 inch is actually 2.5 centimeters. Okay, so the inches and the inches will cancel, and your final answer will be, again, let me just be consistent with my colors. So I'm going to use blue to cancel off my units. And then remember, if your denominator is not visible, it's 1. So you multiply your numerator separately. So 74 times 2.5, 74 times 2.5 is 185. And then 1 times 1, right? You multiply your denominator, it's still 1. And my final units has to be in centimeters, okay? And they're just saying use mental math to estimate your answer, right? So remember, 6 feet, right? Mental math, you would have to do it this way. So 6 feet means 1 feet is 30 centimeters, right? So 6 feet will equals to 150 centimeters. Sorry, 180 centimeters. Because 1 feet is 30, so 6 feet will be 30 times 6, so 180. And then Alex also, he also has this extra 2 inches, 2 inch plus 2 inch, right? So 1 inch is 2.5, so 2 inches will be 5 centimeters, right? So if you add this up, then it gives you 185, okay? But this is mental math, right? So some of you might be good at this, some of you might not be so great. Um, I'm not going to ask you a question like this to use mental math and check. You could do this on your own, but the best way of doing a question like this is to just multiply it out and make sure your units cancel, okay? And this technique is known as unit analysis. Um, I learned this technique when I was in college, and in college they call this dimensional analysis, okay? So very powerful technique. It will really, it's way better than cross multiplication, because cross multiplication, as you saw at the beginning, takes forever. And with this, you can they convert so many units so rapidly, and it's very it's used a lot in your science courses. Okay, by science courses I mean like maybe next year when you take chemistry and physics. you will have to rely on this technique. Okay, so I hope this kind of made sense. If it did not, then I will be holding office hours as well. Okay, so don't be shy to send me an email. But remember, guys, because this is a video, right? You can always pause the video and proceed at your own pace. So if something doesn't make sense, like at least watch the video once completely, and then if you want, watch it again. But you can pause, fast forward, or rewind and proceed at your own pace. Okay. So this is it, and this is your homework, guys. So please do these questions in your textbook. And if you're getting the right answers, then that obviously means that you kind of understood what we did today. Okay, so thank you so much for your time, guys. Have a nice day.